Hillary has emerged from the woods to call Bernie Sanders sexist yet again. Let's go through this. Hillary Clinton calls Bernie Sanders sexist in new book. I know the kind of things he says about women. Oh, do you? Do you? I didn't know you talked to Bernie on the regular like that. Oh, that's right, you don't. And you just don't like him, even though he campaigned for you a bunch of times after he stepped down, even though they basically rigged it against him. This is... Man, she's so petty. Hillary Clinton has ripped her 2016 Democratic primary rival, socialist Vermont Senator. I hate when they do that. You know he's a Democratic socialist. And to just call him socialist is not a fair representation, but they do it anyway. Socialist Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders as a male chauvinist in a new book, hinting darkly that, quote, I know the kind of things he says about women and to women. The former Secretary of State's insinuation is included in the forthcoming book, Electable, by NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitali, which focuses on the 2020 presidential campaign and the preponderance of female candidates who saw the Democratic presidential nomination that year. One of the subplots of the book, which was excerpted by Politico Friday, is the running drama between Sanders and his fellow left-winger, Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts. I would put a little asterisk by that fellow left-winger thing, which climaxed in a hot mic moment during a January 2020 debate in Iowa. The spat spilled into the headlines after Warren accused Sanders of telling her in private that a woman couldn't win the presidency. He denied making the statement during the debate, prompting a furious Warren to approach him after the event with her microphone still on. Okay, so let me pause here. This is something we talked a lot about at the time. My guess as to what went on behind the scenes, and this is just a guess, but my guess is they had a conversation about, look, are you going to run? I want to run. Do you want to run? Like, what's going on here? They're trying to basically feel each other out in terms of their future plans. And, you know, within the context of a conversation between friends, because they were friends, Bernie probably said something along the lines of, you know, that Donald Trump guy, he's a racist, he's a sexist, he's a homophobe, he's an anti-Muslim bigot, and, you know, he's going to weaponize everything against everybody. And he's probably going to do unfair attacks against a female candidate. And Elizabeth Warren twisted the meaning of that as if Bernie was saying to Warren, like, a woman can't win the presidency or whatever. Or, in other words, Bernie was kind of making the woke point, right? Like, hey, it's harder for a woman to become president because of all the biases against women and how the right weaponizes gender stuff like that. So he was making the woke argument, and she twisted it as if he was being, like, super unwoke, or he was being bigoted or something. And so Bernie rightly felt betrayed by that because he's like, what are you doing? Like, and they were friends. Remember, guys, just so everybody understands, the idea that Bernie is some sort of a misogynist. He asked Elizabeth Warren to run in 2016 so he wouldn't have to. He didn't want to run. He didn't want Hillary to be coronated, and he knew she was a weak candidate, and she doesn't have good politics. Elizabeth Warren has better politics than Hillary Clinton, although now that's debatable, right? But I think it is still a little bit better, even though she's no Bernie Sanders. Bernie would have preferred Elizabeth Warren to Hillary, so Bernie tried to get Elizabeth Warren to run for president. So the same person who 4 years earlier was prodding you to run because he didn't want to run, now all of a sudden this guy's, what? In your argument is he's telling you don't run because you're a woman and a woman can't be president? Shut up. It's, oh God, it's so gross. It's so gross. Quote, I think you called me a liar on national TV. Oh, sorry, that's Warren. I think you called me a liar on national TV, Warren told Sanders, who responded, what? After Warren repeated herself, Sanders tried to shrug her off, saying, let's not do this right now. You want to have that discussion? We'll have that discussion. Clinton, who was watching the altercation unfold, told Vitali, I believed her, talking about Warren, because I know Sanders, and I know the kinds of things he says about women and to women. So I thought that she was telling an accurate version of the conversation they had. However, the former lady added that she wished Warren had gone after Sanders over his denial in the middle of the debate, rather than confronting him afterwards. In other words, dig a deeper hole for yourself, Elizabeth Warren. Because, you know, the reaction to that, by and large, was everybody saying, that was gross. You're clearly attacking him in a way that's unfair, that's portraying him as a sexist, when you know damn well he's not a fucking sexist. But Hillary was like, hey, you should have doubled down on the dumbness. Quote, I wish she had done it on mic. I wish that she had pushed back in front of everybody. I think it weakened her response that it was after the cameras were supposedly off and, you know, they were just standing there, Clinton said. I think it's important that you call it out when it happens. And that was my only regret for her, that I wish she had just turned on him and said, you know, it's one thing to mislead people about your healthcare plan. What? It's another thing to tell someone to her face that a conversation which you know happened didn't happen. I mean, that would have been, I think, a really important moment for her. No, it wouldn't have been. Again, she would have dug the hole deeper. Because everybody in the wake of that said that was really gross of Elizabeth Warren to try to imply that Bernie Sanders is sexist by mischaracterizing a conversation that they had. Regardless of what she heard, she knew that Bernie was not a sexist. So to portray it in that way was her trying to score cheap political points to dig herself out of her own political grave, which she was in because she was slipping massively in the polls. And of course, Hillary's like, that evil, fucked up, misleading thing you did, you should have done harder and more aggressively. Clinton defeated Sanders for the Democratic nomination, in 2016 following a tougher-than-expected fight for delegates. Sanders again ran for president in 2020 and again came in second, this time to Joe Biden. During both campaigns, Sanders was accused of stoking a subculture of young male supporters dubbed Bernie Bros, who bullied and harassed women who did not support his candidacy. I mean, look, now we're pretty far removed from when all this originally happened, and now the more I read back on it, the funnier it is. This notion of, like, Bernie Sanders supporters are uniquely sexist. Yes, the people who support the most left-wing candidate in the entire U.S. federal government, they're sexist. You know, the guy who is out there all the time talking about equal pay for equal work? They're sexist. They don't like women. Look, the fact of the matter is, they would, if there was a Bernie supporter who was a passionate young man and they argued for Bernie, they would just define anything you say and say to any other female who happens to be online. They would just define it as like, that's harassment. You're harassing me by pointing out facts about his policy positions. It was such a ginned up nonsense narrative, and it landed. And by the way, Hillary tried the same thing when she ran against Obama in 2008, which by the way she lost. And you know what the article said at the time? There are all these quote Obama boys who are ruthlessly aggressive and sexist, and they're mean to Hillary and her supporters. It's dirty gutter politics, smearing people in the Democratic base. That's all it is. In March 2020, after dropping out of the race, Warren told MSNBC that Bernie Bros had posted the home addresses and phone numbers of two women of color who worked for or ran groups that had either endorsed her or not endorsed Sanders. Okay. I have no idea if this story is true. No idea whatsoever. Doxing is wrong. Nobody should ever dox. If you're in my audience and you've ever considered doxing somebody, don't. It's terrible. It's wrong. It's, bad things can happen as a result of it. Okay? But again, you never know how much this stuff is true because so many of the things they say are just flat out lies. The move, she said, led to an onslaught of online threats. When asked by host Rachel Maddow if the harassment issue was a particular problem with Sanders supporters, Warren answered yes. Quote, it is. It just is, she said. This is the gross thing. This is the gross thing that they do all the time. They try to equate social democracy supporters with fascists. Yeah, there's just a lot of harassment and a lot of evil maliciousness and a lot of violence and threats and crimes by these people. It's come on, man. Anyway, Sanders didn't respond for this story because he's correct not to respond for this story because he's trying to stay above it all. Well, I am not above it all, and my job is commentator, and I will commentate on this. What they did to Bernie was grotesque. What Hillary did, what Elizabeth Warren did, what the DNC did, and of course, it's that famous Malcolm X quote, if you're not careful, the media will have you loving your oppressor and hating the oppressed. And that's effectively what's going on here. Well, to be fair, actually, the New York Post might be framing it in not as nefarious a way, but a lot of the media, especially at the time when this was all going on, it was very, pro-Hillary, pro-Elizabeth Warren, casting out Bernie as he's the bad guy. And that's that narrative 101 right there. The guy who's actually going to fight for you and want you to have health care and higher wages and all that stuff versus the standard status quo politicians who will do tweaks around the edges. That was the dynamic. And still at this late date, they can't help but taking potshots at him because he exposes them for what they are. He exposes them for being useless corporate neoliberals and not really being in the fight for the right purposes. And they despise that about him. They'll never forgive him for that. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.